I know, episode 4. Wolf already knows I picked this song because of him. All right, guys. Well, I don't need to make an introduction of my guest today because he is doing it himself. But guys, I'm super excited for this episode today. I got my buddy Wolf Hudson on. We'll dive into an intro here in a second, but this one's gonna be it's gonna be lighthearted, it's gonna be fun, and then it's gonna be deep and it's gonna be raw. So I'm really excited about introducing my friend here, Wolf. He's personality 100% all the way, and I love him to death. So I'm super excited to have him on the show. We're going to be talking a lot about his journey, his life, what's shaped him to be who he is, and some of the painful experiences that he's had. So again, keep your ears open, your hearts open, and I hope you take something away from this episode today that you can apply to your life and, just learn from the experiences of another human being. So thank you for coming in today and listening to Wolf and I's conversation, guys. So Wolf Hudson, dude, I'm super excited to have you. I like to open up the episodes just by giving you an opportunity to, just kind of introduce yourself. Like, who are you? Where are you from? What do you do? And then we'll start peeling back the layers on all that fun stuff.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm Wolf Hudson. I'm an adult performer slash sex worker for the past 17 years. I've been shooting every single genre that you can possibly imagine in porn and still going strong.
There we go. Which is
Yeah.
for anybody who's not familiar with sex work or the porn industry, 17 years is a feat. There's not, how many people do you know right now that are in the industry that were in it when you started?
Very few.
Yeah, especially
Very
performer
few.
wise. Yeah,
No, the crazy thing now is the performers that were born after 2000. I'm like, excuse me?
Oh, I bet you get this too. I love it. I have people hitting me up still. So if you're new to following me, by the way, guys, if this is like you just happen to come across this podcast, you're going to learn a lot about me as more episodes develop, as I bring my guests on and share how I've met these individuals. But yes, I was also in the industry for 8 years. But it's funny because I get people that comment to me like, "Oh, I grew up watching your videos," and I'm just like, "Oh God."
It's bound to happen. Listen, that happens because like when I first got in, I saw the people that I grew up watching as a little kid.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, like they're right in my face, they're hanging out with me, or I'm fucking them. Like that, the cycle repeats itself viciously.
Hell yeah.
All you can do is just, take it with a grain of salt and be appreciative that, people appreciate your work. You're doing something good.
Absolutely, man. Well,
Yeah.
I'm excited to chat more about, you as we were talking a little bit before we went live, and we were talking a little bit about just, like we've known each other for quite a while. I think we met in like 2008 or 2009. Very early on.
We met in Chicago 2008. You were just a young buck. I think you were like
Oh, yeah.
18
Oh yeah,
or
definitely
19,
18.
fresh.
If I was 19, I just turned 19.
Yeah, you were like 18 or 19, one of those two. You were just like this tall, fresh-faced kid. What I remember about you was because I met you outside of a bar that they were hosting like a porn event, and I see you out. And mind you, every guy that was there was kind of putting it on. They were kind of putting up a front. I'm sure you were putting up a front, but yours was, you were so lively, you were so talkative, and you were so positive. You stood out, and immediately I was like, wait a minute, this kid is interesting. And then you come up to me and you say hello, and you're just like talking like we've been talking like forever. And I was like, oh, okay, we're gonna be friends. And then you left, and I was like, where the hell did you go? And then you came back, and then we were acquainted.
Sounds about right. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Dude, we it is crazy that we crossed paths so early on, and then we've had very similar. It's weird. We had very parallel kind of journeys for quite a while, but then our lives got a lot, or our careers got a lot different, and we'll dive into that. I want to kind of talk a little bit about before we met, just to kind of set the context and like the character of like who you are as a human being. Tell us a little bit about growing up. I know you grew up in New York City. And I would love to hear a little bit more about like your childhood and like just some highlights of like what made you you? Because my favorite part about you, Wolf, is your like authenticity and your ability to just like be yourself, like unapologetically. Have you like always been that way? Was that like how you were as a kid, or is that something you kind of grew into?
I think for the most part, I was always like that. The problem with that was I was misunderstood
Mm,
because I went against convention. Like even with my mother, who was very religious, what she would tell me, for instance, oh, God made Earth in 6 days and took the seventh day to rest. I was like, hold up, how does that doesn't make sense? And she would slap me over the head. Like I was already questioning at a very young age, and I was very just independent minded to a fault where I couldn't help be myself. I
yeah.
had to always be authentic, but it would get me into trouble. And so it wasn't until I got older where I finally realized this is all bullshit. Like this is all just a game, and we're all just like agreeing to play with it. And because of that, I know I can push buttons because other people won't.
Mm,
And so that authenticity for me is just kind of calling it out like, this is bullshit. Like it's not that serious.
yeah.
And I think that that's been a journey for me that has helped me in many ways, especially in the porn industry where everything is so about playing the game. Everybody has a face on. I never played that game,
Mhm.
which ostracized me with a lot of people, especially with the clicks. But that wasn't my concern. It had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with them being something to please other people and not being themselves.
Yeah. Well, and I think ultimately that's what's one probably had you longevity wise. I mean, because like the industry itself is 100% about branding, right? Like, I mean, that's truly what it is. It's about, and you are your brand. And I think the fact that you've
Yeah.
never conformed or like have like gone a certain direction to be a certain way because that's what like the fan base or like the industry wanted you to be. You've just always been yourself. Has carried you for so long. I mean, what what was that like for you, like as a kid, and like going to like to school and having friends? Like, was it like did that make it challenging for you, or did you seem to like have more
Yeah.
friends?
I mean, it made it challenging in many different aspects because, you know, I'm a, I'm, I'm son number four of five kids,
Mhm.
but there's a huge age gap between all of us. And so I was always like the loner in the family in a lot of ways. Going to my school, I grew up in a predominantly black and brown skin Latino school, very few white kids, if any, and I was like, I stood out like a sore thumb. So that in itself made me a target, not a racial target, just it was I was just an easy target to mess with.
Yeah.
So, and then I was very sheltered. My mother, growing up in the '90s, and when you're a kid, you don't realize that. When I look back now, my surroundings was intense. The fact that my mother even went through that and raised all of us is insane. So you add that, I lived a very, very sheltered, closed off life that was very, barely had any friends, but I couldn't really go out to hang out with friends unless my mother was there. I couldn't go to parties. I couldn't do a lot of the things that young kids tend to do, even in
Mhm.
a healthy way, not just being rebellious. And my solace for me, like my comfort zone was movies and television, and then, like especially Jim Carrey is my biggest idol, my biggest inspiration. From that, I got to really kind of find my personality and be like, oh, this guy's weird. It's cool that I'm weird.
Nice.
Everybody else doesn't want to be weird, but I can be weird. And so that shaped me. And just being in New York, period. New York is one of those cities where I mean, it'll eat you up and spit you out if you're not ready. And I was born into it.
Yeah, I've
So
been there.
for me, that the hard knock life of New York prepared me in a lot of ways for my adulthood.
Yeah, I love that you said
Yeah.
that Jim Carrey is one of your biggest idols. That makes a lot of sense. Knowing your personality and enjoying
Hmm.
enjoying just how you show up in
Hmm.
the world as yourself. That it tells me a lot because he's one of my favorite comedians, one favorite actors, and just his like mindset and philosophy and how he has just always
Yeah.
embodied being like just silly and like I don't want to dive down a rabbit hole on Jim Carrey. That's not my goal here, but there's been some documentaries I've watched about him and his acting and things like that, and I can't recall
Hmm.
exactly what was that. I mean, huge movie that he did where he played the guy who passed away. Jesus, I can't
Oh,
remember.
Andy Kaufman.
Yes, like the way that he behaved on set and around everybody and all the time, like it was just like he was like, I'm here to do what I'm doing and I'm embodying it. And like no matter where
Yeah.
I've been with you, like that's been kind of your mindset, man. I mean, like you've always just been, super, super like, hey, like, this is what I'm here to do. I'm here to do a job, and I'm not gonna like pretend to be somebody I'm not. But if I have like a role to play, I'm gonna play it at the best of my ability. You know?
Well, as a person, what I take from Jim Carrey is I commit 100% no matter how it makes me look. I'm
Yeah.
going to commit to myself to be myself. As a performer, what I took from him was the exact same thing, but losing myself in that moment. When I perform, I'm never performing to the camera. I'm never performing for the audience. I'm embodying the person that I am being, which is Wolf Hudson, my alter ego. And Wolf Hudson can get away with more things than the personal me.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm going to go into that part, I have to throw myself no matter how it makes me look. So like if I'm shooting a scene, I'm never concerned about my angles. I'm never concerned about what my face looks like. You know, I'm just in it for the win. And I take that directly from Jim Carrey.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about like when did performing start for you? Because I know adult work was not the first theatrics
No.
or performing that you did.
No.
Talk to me a little bit about how that started.
No, like a lot of performers, adult performers, a lot of them had aspirations to make it in Hollywood. Being in New York, I was exposed to Broadway and, excuse me, a lot of creativity. And one of my biggest passions, even though um, it was my first one, it was dancing. So acting was always the first thing that I wanted to do. And I was trying to pursue that, but dancing kind of took a bigger step for me. And I started doing it in high school. And then I got an internship at this dance school in high school, like towards the end of my senior year. And then I went into it with the same school after high school and just studied modern dancing, modern jazz, hip hop, salsa, and just kind of really went for it. And then my goal at that point was to do music videos. I wanted to be a backup dancer and then maybe go on tour with different artists. So, and I studied method acting and I did a bunch of stuff. So my goal was always that, but you got to pay the bills. So I was doing all sorts of different odd jobs from working, at what do you call it? A button distributor to Starbucks to just all sorts of things just to try to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And like the last job that I had was I was a bookkeeper for a button company. Luckily for me, they laid me off because they went through a merger and they were laying off from each department. That was like the biggest blessing of my life because I hate authority. I hate working for somebody.
I
So it
can't
was
imagine seeing you as an employee.
I couldn't contain my glee when my boss was letting me go because he seemed genuinely upset that happened. And I'm just like, and then no, and then the best part. So then I go back to the office with my colleagues, and I told them, "Oh, I just got let go," and they were like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're leaving." I'm like, "Peace out."
He like danced out the door.
Oh, I should have moonwalked, but I didn't. And and I called my mom, and she was like, "Are you sure? Are you gonna be okay?" I'm like, "I'm perfectly fine." So I literally after that, I was like, "I'm gonna be my own boss. Look for everything that I could do where I can make my own." And some time into that, that's where I found porn. And by complete accident, I was just going through Craigslist
God,
and I
you're
saw
you're a
the adult
Craigslist
section.
recruit too.
Oh, listen, that's the recruitment for a lot of people. And I did, and I saw they were looking for guys to do a gangbang, and I'm like, I could do that. So I went ahead and I did it. My dick was hard, got through it, and that's how I started.
That's awesome.
It was that simple. it wasn't one of those things where I thought like, wow, is this really bad for me? I was like, why not? I did know that once I did porn, any chance of doing mainstream was going to die. So everything that I had worked up until then, I knew it was going to be stalled if I did porn. I just saw porn at that moment as something that I needed to do. And then when I realized that this is something that I could really make something of, I moved to California from New York to pursue it full time. So I moved to San Francisco and just started hitting up everybody from like Falcon to Hot House, Raging, whoever would have
Yeah.
me. And that's how I kind of went. But like before that, I really had my heart set in being a performer and like a mainstream performer. And when I look back, I have no regrets about it because at the end of the day, whether it was going to be in a Hollywood movie or in porn or whatever, my whole goal was always to be an entertainer. That's always been my drive. So this is a form of entertainment. I excel in it and I
Yeah.
love doing it,
Yeah.
So I don't see it as, oh, well, damn, I should have pursued this other thing. I could have done much more. I'm like, no, I'm doing exactly what I need to do. 17 years later, I'm still
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah, 17 years, man. I mean, there's not a lot of people out there that can say they did the same thing for 17 years, let alone in an industry that fluctuates the way that, the ups and downs and, the judgment that gets put towards, I mean, somebody that won't work for 17 years at a grocery store and nobody really judges a grocery store. People judge
No,
the
no,
sex
no.
industry a lot, so there's a lot of energy being thrown into the direction of performers, yeah, pretty much consistently.
That's more of an American thing, to be honest with you. Like, if you ever notice, anytime Americans ask, like, hey, what do you do for a living? Like, why do you need to know what I do for a living? And the reason people ask is because they want to size you up. And like, if you
Mm-hmm.
make money, they look at you in a different way. If you're not making money, oh, they can look down on you. That's why whenever I meet somebody, I never ask what they do for a living until they bring it up in conversation. Sometimes that could happen months, even years later. Like
Yeah, you're like, oh,
there's
that's
somebody that
cool.
yeah, no, like seriously, like I take my dog to the dog park, and there's like a whole community of people that take their dogs there. So I've been acquainted with people there, and there's a guy I didn't know what the hell he did, and I just found out that he works for an oil company. Of course he does. It's Texas, but but I didn't know, and it was like, oh, cool, awesome. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
It's like as long as you're happy, that's what matters. But I don't need to find out what you do for a living to size you up. And I feel like that's what a lot of people do with porn. They either look up and say, "Oh my God, you're doing porn. You must be living this fucking life," or they look down and you're like, "Wow, you're dead." I'm like, no, I'm just a working guy, and I enjoy what I do.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy what you do? Probably not.
More times than not. Yeah.
More times than
Well,
not.
so how quickly did you know that this was something that you wanted to like run with? I mean, like I know you did like that scene or whatever, like was it something like right away you're like I want to pursue this, or was it like yeah, I kind of flirted with it for a bit?
Yeah. No, it was a couple of months into it where, I was, it was in New York, so there wasn't a lot of work, but I was getting the work nonetheless, and I was making more money than I was making anywhere else in a regular job. And so I had the opportunity to move to San Francisco to shoot for a studio, not only shoot for that studio, but also be an assistant for that studio. They were called factory videos. And they took me to San Francisco, and realizing that this is an opportunity that a lot of people don't get, I took it seriously even further. And I was like, okay, I need to create my brand. I need to create this persona that's going to get me far, or else I'm just doing this in vain. I don't want to look back and say, oh, I did this thing and I didn't amount to anything, or, it was not worth it. So I just created this Wolf Hudson character who's super kinky, super badass, shave my head, goatee earrings, nah, you know, which a lot of it was me, but enhanced.
Yeah.
Yeah, but and just seeing the reaction from people, because truth be told, I've always considered myself a very average looking guy. I'm just like, I'm not an Adonis. I'm not what a lot of people expect in a porn star, male porn star. to have seen the reaction from people being both ways, either he's butt ugly or holy shit, he's fucking gorgeous. You know, it was a bit overwhelming for me, and I never thought that I could be viewed as a sex symbol, as somebody that could be sexualized. I just thought, okay, I got a dick. It's pretty big. It's a beginner's large, you know, and yeah, I could do this and not thinking that it can go any further than that. I just wanted to
Mhm.
be professional and just get the work and do what I love, which is entertained. The fact that everything else happened, it was out of my control.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So what did getting into this work like do for you as far as like confidence sexually and things like that? Like, I mean, I know you know we'll dive into some parts of sexuality in general because I know. I mean, well, let me ask you this: when you first shot porn, was that was gay porn? Your first scene?
No, when I started it was straight.
It was straight. Okay.
But not long after I started doing gay per the recommendation of one of the girls that I work with. She said, "Oh, papi, do you also do gay porn?" I said, "No, not really." I was like, "Oh, you should. You would make more money." And it wasn't even something that I really had to think twice. I was more like, "Huh, yeah, why not?" You know, and at that point, not really delving into my sexuality, it was more of like, "Yeah, I could probably do it," and I did it.
Yeah.
You know, so like for me, it's never been do I really have to think about it? It's more of like, am I comfortable enough to do something? And most often not, yes, because like there's really no middle ground for me.
Yeah. It's
I
either
make
you're
my
like
decisions.
yes or no.
Yeah, I would say it's a bit impulsive, but my impulsiveness comes from a very rational place, and I don't know how to describe it. My brain works very quickly with figuring out what's good for me and what's not.
Mhm.
I would say honestly, like 85% of the time.
Yeah, what I'm imagining, like the way your brain works, is like the the mindset of like cliff jumping. It's like, yeah, this is dangerous, but I
Ye-
feel safe enough to make this leap, and I'm doing it with trusting myself and just riding out because once my feet leave the edge, I'm fucking in. Yeah.
Fear is my best friend in a lot
Mhm.
of ways because fear gives me drive. It gives me the adrenaline to push myself further because I know fear is the thing that is trying to keep you down, but there's so much more on the other side. So if you can push past it, you'll find out whether it's a success or a failure.
Mhm.
I to me, I am a failure for not going for it. I'd rather fail having done it.
Yeah.
And
Fail
many
forward.
times I have, yeah, many times I have failed forward, many times. But I had to go through that to learn, to experience, and be like, hey, okay, I won't do that again. Or you know what? I could do it a different way.
Mhm. That's awesome, man.
So it's the same thing with porn and just like getting into gay porn. It was never something that I really had to think much about. Now, my vocabulary back then was way off. It was not what it is today to the point where I could fully express what my sexuality was, which got me in trouble a couple of years ago when I said, I hated gay sex. And I was kind of put in a gotcha moment, but I take full responsibility in saying what I said. What I should have said was, you know, I prefer having sex with women. I am not romantically interested in men, but I do enjoy having sex with men. Back then, I thought if I said I enjoy having sex with men, it meant that I was
It was
gay.
gay. Yeah.
I could not express that I can have sex with men physically without having the emotional attachment,
Yeah.
you know? And so, that got me into trouble many years ago with a lot of people. And,
Oh yeah.
and but
The
that was
bloggers, the bloggers came after you.
not just the bloggers, the fans too. It
Yeah.
was, but I took that in stride. And that was the best thing that happened to me because so many people were attacking me so brutally, so viscerally that I was like, the only person that I really care for is my mother. If I have her support, everybody else is. chatter is just that. It's just noise.
Hmm.
So I told my mother right around that time, I said, Mom, this is what I'm doing.
So she didn't know. How
And
long did she not
she
know
didn't
what you were
know.
doing?
This was like, so I started porn in 2006, like middle of 2006. And then I told my mother 2009.
Okay.
So yeah, so almost 3 years. And yeah, so I hadn't told her. My brother knew what I was doing. I remember I called him the day before and I said, "Listen, bro, I'm gonna tell mom, all right?" And he was like, "Oh, I don't know you, bro. I don't know you." I'm like, that's what I'm saying. Exactly. Exactly. You don't know me. That's the whole point. It's like, shh, so you don't get in trouble. And I told my mother, I said, "Listen, let me speak and let me say my piece, and then you can chime in." And I told her straight up everything as detailed as I could. And there was a long pause, and my mother said, I understand it's a job. I don't like it, but you're my son and I love you. Make your money. Please be safe. And it's okay." And I was like, oh shit. Like literally, that was such a huge weight off my back,
Yeah.
or off my shoulders, that all the other stuff that was coming my way, even though it was deserved, putting my foot in my mouth, it didn't resonate as much with me at that moment because I had my mother's backing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man,
And
that's such a
so
powerful moment I can imagine for you.
yeah, but it was a learning curve for me that, words matter. I'm a very blunt guy by nature, but it really taught me a valuable lesson of really taking the time to like know what you're saying, know that every word has weight to it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't have to say things. If you really don't want to talk about something, you just say, "I'd rather not talk about it." Move
Yeah.
on. Now when I talk about my sexuality, I'm very open about just going into detail and expressing every single nuance and how that correlates with other people
Yeah. Hence your social
around me
media
or around the
handles.
world. No, it's hence my social media handle, but it's true, and it's like until this day, I still, you know, I do identify as bisexual, but I also identify as heteroromantic
Mm.
because romantically, I am still into women, and that hasn't changed. I'm not opposed to being romantically interested in a man. It just hasn't happened to me. So
Yeah.
I know my truth at this moment. I'm also not afraid of what my future looks like. And I think that's the biggest hang up that people have is like they can't see how fluid sexuality can be. People have to have a definition and
You
a
have to
label
fit in
for
this
every little
box,
thing.
and
You
yeah.
have to, and it doesn't, and it's not.
And that's usually
You can.
people who haven't explored it is really the reality. Those are people who have just been in the thing that they know, and they have not looked at anything else or explored it, tried it, tasted it, educated themselves about it. It just because it's fear. I mean, I think that's really what it is.
But that's part of what the heteronormative society has kind of put in place that straight is the only way, and that anything that's considered subversive is wrong. And so what you have is let's say gay men. A lot of gay men take pride in being gay, and so anything that goes outside of that, like being bisexual, is a slap in the face. And so they're doing the exact same thing as the straight counterparts. I've always said that homosexuals and heterosexuals are in the minority. Everybody else in the middle is literally on a spectrum of some level.
Yeah.
And at some point, whether they experience something or they have an inkling in their heart, not every single person, the majority of people are not straight or gay. They have some sort of interest. Most people are afraid to admit that because of the construct of you have to be a certain way.
Yeah.
I've never given a shit. I'm like, I will suck a dick and I will eat pussy. What?
And what? And
What?
I think a big part of it is what will other. It's not even so much about them. I mean, it's really not. It's what will other people think, and it's because of how they were
Right.
raised, or they saw somebody be mistreated for expressing themselves authentically at some point in time, and I think this all goes back, and I love at certain points of our talks, like I love mirroring like things back to your childhood, like those experiences of you, how you were as a kid, right? Just fully authentically expressing yourself and being you and being like, whatever, I don't really give a fuck. And even though you were a little bit of an outcast in some settings or whatever, felt uncomfortable, or not felt uncomfortable, felt like not a part of or whatever, like you just kept
Hmm.
being you and
Yeah.
said fuck it, and it's the same thing with this. It's like the
Yeah.
reason that you've been able to maneuver through so many different stages of your career and peel back so many layers on yourself to understand yourself is because you've been training for this since you were a child, right? Through just
It's
authentically being
literally,
you.
yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. But it's true though. It's always been. I've always questioned why. Why can't I do that? When somebody tells me I can't do that, I'm always been like, why? And I want to hear a legitimate argument to change my mind, because the one thing about me is I'm very strong to my convictions and I'm very passionate, but I'm not afraid to be proven wrong. A lot of people don't want to ever be wrong.
Yeah.
So it's like, don't tell me that I'm wrong. Don't tell me that, you know, everything that I've done up until this point is wrong. Show me that I'm wrong. Most often than not, people can't do that.
Yeah.
And because of that, I know I'm in the right.
Yeah.
And in those times when I've been proven wrong, it's like, you know what? I just learned something. Dope. Let's and it just I grow because of that. I become a better person. When I look at myself now at 38 than when I was even at 28, vastly two different
Mm.
people. I mean, the 28-year-old guy was a boy in a lot of respect. The 38-year-old me is almost a man, but he's a man.
Yeah.
It's like he's much more mature. He's much more aware of what's valuable and what really means to be a person, and to value the things that are around you and experiences.
Mm. Well, I do want to take a second just to acknowledge you for that journey, for getting to like to truly understand yourself and your sexuality. So not only so you can convey it to other people, but get other people the permission to go there. Because I think for me, I don't like to spend too much time talking about myself on these, because this is really about bringing my guest in. But for me, like, dude, that was the constant struggle of being in the industry for me. It was like I came in, having had very, very limited experiences with men, and they were not interactory. It was just watching porn or whatever together. So it was very
Mhm.
surface level. And then getting thrown right into like, all right, well, you're going to fuck this guy. I'm like, okay, like that's new. And so it took a long time for me to really get like clear with like, what does this mean to me? Because there was this level that you said, like, of fluidity. Like I was okay performing. Did I have some like, not stage fright, but just some nervousness behind the camera and stuff? Of course. But the sexual act was never, it wasn't like I was like, it wasn't like I was trying to eat something that I didn't like just to get it down. I wasn't like, oh God, okay, let's get through this. Like I got to make the money. I was always okay with what I was doing. And sometimes I was more turned on depending on my partner than others.
Right,
But the
right.
reality is that I was never not okay with the sexual act of being with the men. And I love the way that you put, hetero romantic, because for the longest time it was so hard for me to identify. And it was mainly because people were trying to label me. Oh, he's straight. Oh, he's gay for pay. No, he's a closet. He's bisexual. He's this, he's that. And it was just like I was fucking 18 years old, 19, 20, quote, maturing. And then, and many people know, like going through some pretty gnarly experiences with drugs and alcohol at the time. I was
Yeah,
like very much struggling to like self identify, and then having all these outward, very strong voices coming at you. I mean, when you have 50,000 people following you on a social media outlet and they're all commenting on your shit, it's
yeah.
hard to not absorb that, And so I really acknowledge you, because it wasn't until I got sober that a friend of mine in AA actually, he did, or I should say that, and a friend of mine in the 12 step program, um, he, he, uh, he was doing like a college paper. He's a homosexual man doing a college paper about sexuality with men. And, through a long series of questions and all this stuff, he talked to me about the concept of men having a man that has sex with men. That was the concept that he talked to me about. And it's just so funny because it's such a simple fucking answer, but it's like I never looked at it like that, because society talks about homosexuality, bisexuality, heterosexuality. So it's
Or
just like,
barely, or bisexuality.
yeah, well, barely about bisexuality, yeah. But it was like, well, you could be a man who has sex with men and not be homosexual. And I was just like,
Absolutely.
wow, that
Who you
thought never crossed my mind before. you know?
who you have sex with does not change how you identify. You can identify as anything you want, or you don't have to identify as anything. Like there really is no right or wrong. It has to be true to you. I know plenty of gay men, self-identified gay men, who have sex from time to time with women. Does that change their sexual orientation? Not for me. Like to me, they're still very much gay if that's how you choose. If they come out at some point and say they identify as bisexual, dope. Like I
Yeah.
know a guy who didn't figure out until in his 40s. He had been living a gay life and then he got interested in doing bi porn and now he identifies as pansexual. He says, I love it. I can't believe I missed out on having sex with women.
Yeah.
It's like it could be that easy. So like to me, the indicator of who you are does not is not defined by who you have sex with.
Yeah.
That is entirely up to you. What everybody else thinks of you is none of your business.
Yeah.
That's their business, how they think of you, because they're not open-minded enough to realize that you can live your life and they can live their lives. Most often than not, those people are jealous that you
Yeah.
can have
That's
this sort of fluidity and they can't,
that's what it
or
comes back to.
they want to have
Yeah. It's funny, man. I've learned, should I say, so much in like the last 8 years, getting sober and really just reflecting on my experience in the industry, being in it for a pretty long time. It's like parts of me, I just like, man, if I could go back and just like do a few things differently. I mean, I'm grateful the way that it all played out, right? I
it.
have
Sure.
zero regrets. But man,
Yeah.
I wish that I can go back and for like at least a portion of my career had been sober, because like
Yeah.
they're struggling with my addiction coinciding with all these other aspects of being in the business really robbed me of processing a lot of the things that we're talking about right now that would have given me
Yeah.
so much more like joy in the business and like been able to like really like like soak in like the actual like I don't want to say benefit because that's like such a lame way of pleasure, I guess, is really pleasure of being an adult performer and learning so
Right.
much about yourself, dude. Because I have so many people, yourself included, other people that I'll leave out of this episode, but that I'm very close to that had dramatically different experiences in the sex industry than I did. And for
Right.
me, it was because I was constantly fighting this battle of James LaRusso, the drug addict, and Tommy Defendi, this guy who everybody loved and like was trying to perform and like be this symbol of like, of sexual fluidity, really, because a lot of people knew my life in and out of porn, but then also of this like
Right.
sex symbol and this performer and this erotic like being. And man, there was such a fucking there's so much tension between those two things that made it hard for me to really soak it in. So I love
We can
hearing that,
we can always look back and say, "Oh, I wish I could have done this different." But another way of looking at it is we needed to go through that experience to get to where you are today. Because think about it like this: if you hadn't gone through what you did, if this information was available to you back then, would you have taken it? Would you have understood it?
Yeah.
Would you?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people will just brush it off, even though, like, let's say I'm a voice of reason and I'm telling you how it is. A lot of times people are like, I don't want to hear that shit. And then they find out years later, oh shit, I should have listened to you.
Yeah.
So if you hadn't gone through what you did, you would not be the man who you are today. It's a bit of a cliche to say, but it's true
Oh,
because
absolutely. I mean, that's what this is all
it
about, right?
it defines us. It
Yeah.
really does, and we use our experience to hopefully not only better ourselves but better other people. So they don't make the same mistakes. And if you are going to make those mistakes, well, at least you know already that it's a mistake.
Yeah.
Do it. So when it fails, it's like, oh, okay, I had that coming to me.
Yeah.
Because da da da. I don't ever look back and say, I wish things could have been different. I have often wondered what my life would have been like had I gone down this route. But I'm at a point right now where I'm so happy. If I hadn't gone through a lot of the bullshit that I went through, I wouldn't be in this place. I don't know. I probably would have been in a completely different direction.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I take everything in stride, and I think your journey is a special one. It's not a unique one, but it's a special one, and it's molded you, and you're so much better for it right now. I mean, you've been sober for a while now.
Yeah.
You have a wonderful partner. You're doing this amazing podcast. I think that that journey got you to this point, or else you could not have done this podcast years ago without
Oh
having
no.
any true understanding.
Well,
I
and I
mean, you
think
probably could have
yeah,
done a podcast, but it would have been
way
about
different.
completely different shit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the cool thing is like I mentioned, turning pain into purpose, right? It's like the amount of pain that I've experienced is because of that that tension the internal tension and conflict that I had with myself, So yeah, I mean, I'm super grateful for that aspect, and then also being able to experience like people like yourself and many of the other friends that I have that have had such unique and different experiences in the business and like of self discovery. Because I really think that's you don't get to fucking find out anything about yourself when you're a bookkeeper, at work. Like your experience, like as a bookkeeper, you're not, and this isn't to dog on anybody who does that for a living. I'm just saying, like at work, you are not learning about yourself and about who you are and your personality and your character traits and your sexuality and like looking fear in the face and saying like this is what I'm going to do to learn more about me and who
Yeah.
I am. And you just don't get to do that. And in an industry like the sex industry or being a sex worker, you do at a very raw and real level, and you
I'll
bring,
tell you this.
go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
Well,
Oh, I was going to say that, I realized fairly recently, within like the past 5 years, how much of my thought process with sexuality being so much more broad, it came into play when I decided to start shooting again after a brief hiatus, and I wanted to exclusively just shoot bi porn because it was one thing I thought it was fun. It wasn't really tapped into. I had done straight and gay. I didn't care for anymore. And seeing the response from doing that, a genre that everybody said doesn't sell, doesn't do anything. I made so much money off of that. And it wasn't about the money, but I made so much money off of that. That can't be an accident. It can't just be about, you know, one individual person. It could be about that too, but it was more than that. It was because every single message that I heard, whether it was a guy or a girl, a lot of times it was a guy saying, "Thank you for putting this out there. You made me comfortable being bisexual, being pansexual because you're putting it out there
mm-hmm.
unabashedly, just being just into it." You aren't seeing that out there. I've traveled all over the world. More so now, I travel over the world and I get recognized and I get told, I came out because of you. I'm bisexual. Now my family accepts me and this and this and that. To not, I've never had that reaction with anything else that I've done throughout my career.
Yeah.
And it has everything to do with there is an appetite out there for that, but no one is getting the representation. No one is fighting to show sexuality in a much more fluid way.
Yeah.
I did it because I just wanted to have fun. I wasn't trying to be political whatsoever. But the fact that I am doing this is political, and so it is my responsibility to continue being authentic and showing that the way I enjoy it, not for the sake of just making bi porn to be political,
Yeah.
to make a statement.
Well, and that in itself just goes back to people fearing being authentic with themselves, like you being
Yeah.
like I said earlier, that word permission, that is such a huge thing. Like people need, you never needed permission,
Never.
because you never needed permission, you are the permission for other people to go somewhere that they haven't gone before, or open up about something that they haven't opened up before. And I love that. And I love that, like your moment of vulnerability and authenticity with your mom one day, like has like vibrated out into this like amazing thing where like hundreds and thousands of people's lives have changed in because you got really authentic about what you were doing and you got the approval from the one person that mattered the most in your life, and
She
then
was
you
the
just
only one.
fucking sprinted and ran with it and haven't looked back since.
You know, so my mother passed away in 2017, and I went ahead and took care of her for the last few months of her life. And excuse me, last few months of her life. And I remember she was in the room laying in her bed and she was having a conversation with me and my older sister. And she said very flat out, like, I'm so proud of all my kids. I'm the black sheep of the family, technically, but she included me in that. She was proud of me. Like, that meant everything to me because up until that point, being the outcast and having done all this stuff that was against society, again, the person who accepted me for what I did and accepted me as a person, period, towards the end of her life, she was proud of me, and she did say this to me. Actually, she said it to me when I was a kid, and then she kind of said it to me around the time that she died. She said, of all my kids, you give me the most grief, but of all my kids, I worry least about you.
Mm.
She never worried about me. She never had to question if I was going to be all right because she knew that I was going to be all right. She knew that I had the street smarts, the intelligence to get by, and I had the emotional capacity,
Yeah.
the emotional strength to do my thing as opposed to my other siblings who are strong and smart in their own way. I had a different vulnerability where she was a little bit more concerned about.
Mm.
But I gave her the most grief because I was so much like her in that we were very independent,
Yeah.
pushing against authority. So you can
You're like,
imagine
we're gonna
what
go get some
moments
grain a
I
little
got
bit.
because of that, but because she recognized that, you know, I I could do things for myself and I just wasn't going to take shit from anybody.
And that has been the case for a long time.
Yeah, I felt it with the belts, man. That woman whooped my ass so many times. It was funny too. Like, when I think back, it's like, dude, that shit was funny. But it is what it is, and and I'm just thankful that I had a woman like that to draw upon and to support me, and it's molded me to this day. And so I all I can do now is not only continue to be the best person that I can be, but hopefully like be there for anybody who needs a shoulder, who needs an ear, who needs a hug. It just whatever I can give, if I can give it, because I
Mhm.
also have to be responsible for my own self and my own emotions. And if I can't be there for somebody, wholeheartedly, I'm not going to put myself in that situation. But I want to be the person that, you know, people can look up to and say, oh, I take what Wolf says and, I take value into what he says. So I want his advice.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
I
know,
mean, I know we've covered a lot of topics today, and I kind of want to dive since we're talking about your mom.
yeah,
Just talking about that experience. I mean, I know. I mean, she passed away. It was cancer, correct? If I'm not mistaken, is that what it was?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, what was that experience like for you? I know. I mean, you were what, 32, 30, 32, 33?
Uh, what this is 2017, so yeah, I was like a month shy of 33.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, that's young to
Oh,
lose your mom, right? I mean, that's not what most people are
yeah,
dealing with at 32, 33. So what?
yeah,
I mean, talk to me a little bit
yeah.
about what was that like dealing with that and like being her caretaker and deciding to put your life on hold and show up and be with her for those months.
Well, when I first got the news that she had cancer, for me, it was very much like, holy shit, like that's my mom, cancer. Like it just, because I mean, that woman she doesn't get sick ever. She
Yeah.
was always such a strong woman. Like, cancer, get the fuck out of here. When I found out that she had cancer, I was in LA. She was in Florida, but she went to New York to get it checked out. I immediately hopped on the next flight to New York. She was staying with my older brother. But specifically got on the next flight because I was being told that my mom did not want to do chemo. And I'm like, we're not playing that game. So I flew to New York and I'm like, you're going to do chemo. And she's like, I'm not doing chemo. It's like, you're going to do it. And it's like, well, it's my body. I can do whatever I want. It's like, and I got into it. I remember my older brother was like, "Bro, leave her alone. Like, if she doesn't want to do it." It's like, no, no, no. This is not up for discussion because we know what's going to happen if she doesn't do it and the pain that she's going to go through. And I flat out told her, if you don't do this, do not count on me to be there in any capacity. And I meant that, like meant that wholeheartedly. I was not going to be a part of her pain because she raised me to be a fighter. My mother
Hmm.
always raised me. It's like, if somebody hits you, you hit back. Because if you don't hit back, I'm going to kick your ass. But it's true, and she meant that.
Yeah.
She would kick my ass if I did not hit somebody. At least if you got beat up, you fought back.
Yeah.
So the fact that she wasn't following suit, I was like, no, we're not doing this. You're gonna do chemo. She ended up doing chemo. I'm not saying that she decided to do chemo because of me, but sometime after that, she was like, okay, I'm gonna do chemo. Okay, it's like, let's do this. So I even flew to New York again to take care of her during the chemo. And she fought for a good 4 years. It started as ovarian cancer, then it went to her breast, and finally it hit her brain. And the brain was like kind of like the last straw. By that time, when it hit her brain, when she said she did not want to do any more radiation, any more anything, I was like, absolutely. Everybody else was saying, no, you should keep going. When she said that, I was like, no, she earned that right. She fought.
Yeah. She was like, I'm gonna
Because
take off the gloves now, kind of deal. Yeah.
yeah, because the quality of life that she had doing chemotherapy, it dramatically changed her. At that point, she deserved to go out with dignity on her terms. Because if she had kept doing it, they were saying, oh, she could probably last another year or two. If she doesn't do it, less than that. She's like, no, you know what? Let me go out and supported her through that. And so she went to live with my sister. She was still in good conditions, even though she was technically dying. My older brother flew out to Salt Lake City, where my sister lived, and was helping take care of my mother. He and my mother have always had a relationship where they were comedic, a comedic duo of unspeakable force. They were just hilarious together, and they always had fun. That was his purpose to be there. It was to keep her entertained and have a good time. So by the time I came in, it was okay. Now we're gonna get down to business and take care of it. And because my brother could not have done what I had to do.
Yeah.
I could do it with a very straight face without even thinking about it. And that's what kind of going back to what I was saying, that my mother doesn't worry about me because she knows I can do it. So
Yeah.
I did that. And for me, I just, when I was taking care of her, I saw the change, the deterioration. So I just made it as comfortable as I possibly could. I still fucking, made fun of her, and I would hop into bed with her, and it'd be like, "Oh, I love you, mommy. I love you so much," but she hated, and she'd be like, "Jesus Christ, what did I do to deserve this? Please," But she would laugh too. But
Yeah.
it was shit like that, and I just I knew what needed to be done, and I did it. And when she passed away peacefully. Everybody else cried. I didn't. I was there as the emotional support for everybody. I
Yeah.
knew that I was going to grieve in my own time. I was going to have my cry in my own time. This is not the moment right now because other people need me. And I wasn't doing it because other people needed me, but I knew people would need me.
Yeah.
So I was that emotional rock for them so that they had the freedom to completely let go, and I got them.
Yeah.
And that's what I was for my mom. And my mom, she fought so hard. And she left with dignity, and she left happy, and she left with not a lot of regrets. She did so much in her short life, but she fucking did it. So when she left, I was actually happy for her. I'll tell you one time she was laying in bed, and I was like on my phone beside her, and I'm looking at social media. And I look over to her, and she's looking up at the ceiling. She's being very contemplative. And I look at her, I was like, "What's wrong, mommy?" And she goes, "Why am I still here?" Like, why haven't I died yet? It's like, I know, I'm waiting for you to croak. Like, for real, like, get the fuck out of here. And I said it to her just like that. And she's like, right? Like, I need to go. But it was that understanding that we had, even though there was a little of humor, it was, I recognized my mom needed to leave because the more she was alive, the more she was in pain,
And
as
unless
opposed to
she
everybody
was like
else.
her, yeah,
Yeah, as opposed to
yeah,
everybody else who wanted her to stay alive for them.
yeah,
She was hurting, so I wanted her to die as soon as possible.
yeah.
Like for me, it was not even a matter of like I want to be here for the next 3 months taking care of her. It's like no, like if you have to die in the next month or week, let's get this shit going.
Yeah.
You know. And so what I finally realized from that whole experience was my mother was actually holding on. She kind of internalized not wanting to die because she was holding on to something, and we realized that she was holding on to something that she needed permission to die.
Mm.
And the only one who can give her that permission was my older sister, Karen. And I remember my mom was like half awake, and my sister started talking to her and saying, Mommy, it's okay if you want to die. Like, I made you a promise that I would take care of all the siblings. They're going to be fine with me. You can go ahead. And when she did that, my mom, like literally, it kind of in a sleep, was tearing up, understood what we were saying, and immediately went to a coma.
I just
And
got
after that
full
coma,
chills.
yeah, she died 3 days after that coma.
Wow.
She let go. She was like that. I think that was her biggest worry. She was worried about her kids, and again, it goes back to what I was saying. Like she always worried about everybody else, not about me. She knew I could take care of myself. When
Yeah.
my sister gave her that permission, that was it. She was like, "Okay, I can go," and she did.
That's so powerful. Thank you so
I
much
was
for sharing
relieved.
that. Yeah.
No
Yeah.
problem. And almost a year later, unprovoked, not even having any thought process, I broke down and cried. For the first time, I wailed. I was just, and I knew what was happening, and it was because of her.
Yeah. It
And
wasn't like, where's this coming from? It was just, but it
no,
just hit you like that. Yeah.
I embraced it, and I was thankful. I was like, finally, I'm not this like machine,
Yeah.
I'm not this emotionless bastard. No, I finally got to let go. It was cathartic, and I needed that so bad, so bad. I needed that because up until that point, after my mom died, I was doing things that were unhealthy, not drugs or anything like that, but I wasn't taking care of myself to the point where physically I saw a change so dramatic. I saw myself like, oh no, we're not doing this. My mother would kick my ass if she saw me in this state. I always think about that kind of stuff.
I think I
And
would know
so
exactly I think this is when I was living in in Altadena because I remember you having like a very dramatic shift.
yeah, and I started working out like a
Hmm.
madman. Look, in ways that I've never ever worked out, never got into that kind of fitness, and I was relentless every day. I would wake up at 8 o'clock. I would jump rope, weighted jump ropes for 30 minutes straight, and then I would walk from my house 25 minutes to Runyon. I would hike all the way up and then walk back down. Oh no, sorry. I would wake up, I would jump rope, and then I would work out for an hour and a half, and then I would go to Runyon and I would hike, and then I would come back. So literally, we're talking in a span of like 4 or 5 hours, and I did that every day, and that was my way of getting through the grief. That was
Yeah.
my way of like, it wasn't so much trying to distract myself. It was more of finding a positive way to work through my emotions because you've been to Runyon. When you go to the top, it's beautiful.
Yeah. You've earned
And when I
something. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so after struggling and pushing and working my fucking body to the extreme and then reaching that peak, and then there's this point of like I can relax and I can contemplate, I can deal with my emotions, I can deal with my thoughts and think about my mother and then move on with my day. And I did that for months to the point where I was so ripped. People were like, "What are you doing?"
I know. I remember seeing
And I
you.
would tell them what I was doing. And I would tell them what I was doing. I can't do that. I'm like, well, then
Yeah. You don't have the
to
same
the
you don't have
point
the
where
same fuel in your tank that I do.
yeah, so no, so then finally I had reached the point where I was like, after the crying, it's like I already reached my grieving. I mean, you never stop grieving, to be
Yeah.
honest with you. You always grieve until the day that you die. You just deal with it differently as time passes. It gets better as time passes. Because I think about my mother every single day.
Mhm.
You just deal with it. So at that point, I was like, I don't have to work out as much. I can still be into fitness and just be healthy for myself, but I don't need to do this extreme anymore. I've accomplished what I needed to do, and it was the best thing that I did. It helped my mind. It helped my soul. I looked great. I felt great, and along the way, it inspired so many other people just with my journey, not specifically knowing the history of my mother dying, but knowing that I could persevere and really commit to something 1000%. And so a lot of other people started getting into fitness. A lot of people were wanting to do intermittent fasting, which I was doing at the time, and doing it in a healthy way and not just because it was a fad. And then people who were having experiences of death could look to me and be like, "Oh my God," and they would ask me questions, and then
Yeah.
like, well, "How did you deal with grieving?" And I would express that, and then they use the same template that I did to help them through grieving, and then they would tell me afterwards, "It did so much for me. Thank you for that."
Yeah. Yeah,
But
that's
it wasn't
the
like something that it wasn't something that somebody told me or I looked up. I just kind of had to do it my own.
yeah, it was just like a natural intuition type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I
yeah.
think that's the beautiful thing about, like that's why I talk about pain in this podcast, right? Is because it's like how can we use that as fuel to move us forward in our life, regardless of what it is, whether it's, being judged or grieving, which is a big one. I mean, I've had one of my dear friends on my first episode, who lost her boyfriend, who was a very very he was that's how I met her, was he was my brother, and so we've had a lot of different topics, and I think the grieving thing is interesting because everybody does deal with it in such different ways. So
There's no right or wrong way.
yeah, yeah, there's really not. I mean, that's the thing that I'm starting to learn as I have these conversations more, because I myself dealt, with using drugs and alcohol. When I lost my grandfather,
Yeah,
when I lost my grandma
yeah,
in high school, and then when that started the shit show, and then it amplified it when I lost my grandfather, because he was like my like true father figure as a child. And then
yeah.
yeah, man, I went off the deep end, and it took me a long time. And then my story is I walked into rehab at 26 years old, and the treatment center that I went into had him and my grandmother all over it, and all these wild physical representations. And that's when I grieved. You know what I mean? That's when I actually felt the emotion rather than masked it. And it took years, but it happened when it was supposed to. And so
Yeah,
it's a really
yeah,
beautiful thing.
absolutely. I mean, well, thank you for sharing that too. I didn't realize like you had gone through all that and at a very young age.
Yeah.
Um, I yeah, grieving never ends. Like every day, I think about my mother. I think about even just recently, about I think 2 months ago, my aunt died, and my aunt, my mother's sister, she also died of cancer complications from leukemia, even though she had been in remission for like over 10 years.
Oh wow.
Um, when I was born in New York in '84. Not long after that, like maybe like a month after that, I moved to Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, to live with this aunt. And I lived with her for a good part of the '80s. So for me, she was my mother for
Mm.
like since an infant to like maybe 3 years old. Then I moved back to New York to live with my mom. She was my favorite aunt because she was the one who raised me at that point. And so I had a very special relationship with her, much different than my other aunts and uncles and whatnot, to the point where, unfortunately, I wasn't there with her when she passed away in New York, but I got to see her on FaceTime. I was the only person who could do that with her when she was on her deathbed. It was the day before she died. I got on FaceTime with her, She would, yeah, she would, everybody was trying to call her, but she would not FaceTime. And I got to do it, and I told her how much I loved her and just how much she meant to me. And you can tell, like, she could barely talk, but I knew, I could tell that she was just emotional. I mean, she was tearing up, and she was like, "I love you. I'm proud of you." And like, she viewed me as a son. Like, she had three kids. I was her fourth kid. And then she passed away the next day, and the, my cousin told me after that call, she went into a coma.
Wow.
I don't, part of me doesn't want to say that I was the reason,
But it's very
but
similar to your sister's story, where it's like,
yeah, it's very similar
yeah,
to, yeah, I'm just kind of now putting that together. I didn't think about that.
yeah,
Yeah, so like she passed away. I told her, like, you raised three amazing kids. You did good. You raised me, and I'm so thankful for you. You're my second mom, and I think she needed to hear that. And she didn't die in pain, thank God.
yeah,
So I've dealt with, my grandmothers have passed away, my father passed away, my mother's passed away. I've had so many uncles have passed away. I've had so many people, including tons of friends. I've always dealt with death, and what I've come to realize is, it is a part of life for this to happen. You do with it what you can. There's no right or wrong way of dealing with pain. There is nothing wrong with being down. There is definitely something wrong with not getting back up. I take issue with people who don't fight back, but I don't judge anyone who's at a low place, whether it's drug addiction, depression, or anything like that. For me, it's always been about, you can be in that place, fight.
yeah,
Even if fighting takes years, have at least that will of, there's something better, or at least have the thought that something is better on the horizon, even in the moments where you're at your lowest. So knowing that people are dying, it's like, I understand that. I'm personally not fearful of death because I've had a close call almost 10 years ago. And life is fragile, but life is not something that you need to be afraid of every little thing. You have to take the risk. You have to be willing to say, this is what I want to do. I'm going to live it. If I fail, I failed trying. You look back and say, you know what? I did that shit. So I celebrate someone's death as opposed to mourning. I can still mourn, but I'm celebrating in that moment of, like, they lived their lives, and I'm very lucky to have been alive when they were alive.
yeah,
And so I can't ever think about, you know, I can never think about it in selfish reasons of like losing somebody and, like, what does that do for me? I can, I am mourning the fact that I'm not going to be around them and have more experiences, but I can't be selfish in that, how does this make me feel in the sense of, like, oh, I'm never gonna, be able to talk with them ever again. I'm never gonna be able to do all these things, as opposed to, like, really thinking about that person's journey, really thinking about what they experienced and what they meant to me all those years. Does
yeah.
that make sense?
Well, yeah, it's
Like,
the
I don't know if
power.
I'm really
Well,
elaborating.
absolutely. It's the powerful perspective of not making the loss of them about you, and
There
it's
you go.
about,
I'm not
yeah,
making it about me
yeah,
at all.
yeah,
Even though I can still feel a certain way, but it's not about me.
yeah,
It's like when I've had friends who've committed suicide, and people have many different opinions when it comes to that. Not me. I don't judge anybody's ability to take that ultimate step. Do I think that you can get past that? Absolutely. But once somebody commits to that, that's a commitment that is final. When
yeah,
somebody reaches that end, that is that's what they needed to do because many people have had the thoughts, but there's still that will. And that's what I was kind of
Yeah.
saying before. There's still that inkling. There's still something more, and they don't go through with it. But I don't judge anybody who says, this is my time to leave because I don't know what it feels like to have that pain of any kind.
Yeah.
Why am I going to judge someone's journey and someone's dignity for wanting to go out the way they wanted to go out and not have the pain take over them?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Because it
and and,
wasn't
that,
the
and that's
first time
a
they had that thought. They just like made that decision.
no.
Yeah. You've been struggling with a lot for a long period of time, you know?
Well, look at Robin Williams. The general idea that Robin Williams died of depression is actually not correct. He had a disease. I think it's Louis something dementia. He
Yeah.
had and that was literally deteriorating his brain cells. That was making him paranoid. That was bringing his depression. What he already had depression was accelerating it. He was going down a path that was beyond his control. He took it upon himself, not because of the depression. It was more of, I don't want to see how far I go into this deterioration. I'm going to end it right now.
Yeah.
Knowing full well he had this career, he had children, he had all of this. It wasn't about that. It was about, I need to leave with dignity. This life, I am not having dignity. I don't want to put this upon anybody else to take care of me when I'm just a vegetable. That's the way I see it. That to me is more powerful. So when people are like, he died of depression, it's like that's too narrow of thinking for me. And just from knowing the disease that he had in his brain and how it affected him,
Mhm.
that position is so much stronger. It is not weak what he did. So people are responsible for themselves. People are responsible for their actions. And I don't believe in a right or wrong. The wrong that I believe in is hurting others willingly.
Mhm.
When you put other people in jeopardy for your own amusement, for whatever other reason, that's not good. I take issue with that. When you deliberately want to hurt somebody, that I take issue with. But the journey that somebody takes, if they have addiction, that's a journey that I feel like a lot of people have to go through in order to go to the other side. I don't judge anybody who has any issues with drugs because it's a much more common thing than people want to recognize. And the biggest thing about that is people don't have the tools to deal with their emotions. This is a good way to deal with it. And because I have the understanding, I get why they do it. And so you can't judge the process.
Yeah.
If anything, I judge the environment that led somebody to go there, the environment that did not give people the tools to be able to deal with their emotions. And a lot of it comes from your home life.
Yeah.
A lot of times you don't get taught how to deal with your emotions. You don't get taught how to deal with anything, how to deal with sex. You don't teach about sex,
Yeah.
you know,
Which
the
is
effects of drugs or
which
anything
is
like
like
that.
at no fault of parents either. It's like they're focused on like keeping you safe, making
They're
sure
a
you're going
product
to
of
school,
their
like
parents.
and they're like trying to make a living, and you know it's like so much shit slips through the cracks. That's the
Yeah.
the funny thing for me. I mean, I could talk a whole nother hour about this, so I'm not, but I won't, so I won't delve too deeply into it. But yeah, that was a big thing for. I grew up in a very normal family in this grand
Yeah.
scheme of things. You know, like super loved from like I did I have a little bit of neglect from my dad, like not as much attention from him as I would like, sure. But was I like
Yeah.
abused? No. Like I had like there was nothing
Yeah.
severely traumatic enough to like set me down the path that I went on, other than my dad neglect and losing my grandma at a young age, But you start hanging out with the wrong people and you start doing something that makes you feel a certain way that helps you process something, it's off to the races. So
What I always thought about you was is your insecurity just came from living up to other people's expectations. I think a lot of pressure was put on you because of how you looked, your personality. That in itself can drive somebody to insanity.
mm,
So it's like you may have lived a quote unquote normal life and not had anything dramatic happen to you that would lead you down the path of doing drugs or whatever. But the fact that so much pressure was put on you and the or expectation to live up to a certain image, that in itself had an effect on you. And I
Yeah.
see that very often, especially with sex workers, like really beautiful, like like the Adonis, the
Yeah.
gorgeous ones. When there's the expectation of them to look a certain way and be a certain way, and they come in, and that's all that they're told are good for. I've seen them
Oh
spiral
yeah,
down
I've seen
immediately after that,
so many people on both sides of the industry that were like the it, of their time have had some
and a
very
lot of them
tragic
pass
ends.
away
Yeah.
at
I've yeah.
tragic ends. And so one does not have to go through something traumatic in their childhood, which is the misconception of sex workers,
Hmm.
to go through anything. All it takes is one little seed, and it could be anything. It could be as simple as, oh, your hair's a little off. That could literally start the spiral of, oh my God, I have to always have my hair. Okay, so I'm gonna do this. Oh, you know what? Maybe my body doesn't look good. I'm gonna start doing steroids. Or it,
Yeah.
it can be that simple, and it trickles into something massive.
Yeah. Yeah.
For
That
me,
snowball
I
effect is real.
always, yeah, I always knew that those were never an option for me. To, I never had time to, I always use this term, but I feel it's kind of inappropriate to say. I never have time to cry in a corner
Mm.
because nobody gives a shit. I have to keep moving. I'm on my own. I have to keep moving. So I just always had to fight back. I always had to fight through everything that I was going through. But what I recognize is not everybody has the foresight to do what I do. Not everybody has the tools that I have. And so to expect people to be exactly like you is a horrible thing, and everybody does it. People always expect people to be exactly like them.
Yeah.
Say, well, why can't you do this? I can do it. It's like,
Yeah.
well, if they could do it, they would do it. Why don't you, as somebody who can do it, give them that information if they want it? Because you also can't force it down their throat.
Well, yeah, and some people
You
always
know,
look for the differences too. They'll be like, "Oh, well, culturally, and where you grew up, Wolf, you grew up in New York, and you're Dominican American, and you have all these things, It's like, well, so were my siblings, but I'm totally different than them. So like,
right?
everybody always looks, I think, for what sets them apart. And like, the truth is
Yeah.
that there is no such thing as separation in the world. Like, there really isn't. You know what I mean?
No.
Like, that's a fucking illusion that we all want to create to make ourselves
Yeah.
comfortable. You know?
We do that to each other all the time, and if it's one thing that's true about every single person is that we're all insecure. All of us. All of us have insecurities, and all of us do not want to be judged by others. And
Mm,
yet we judge others
yeah.
all the time. I've gotten to the point where I don't judge anybody. Even with my own insecurities, I never judge someone because someone, whatever they're going through, not only is it valid, but their experience is a lot different than mine. And for me to invalidate that experience, not only is it wrong of me, but it's debilitating humanity. And I don't say that in a hyperbolic sort of way. A lot of powers that be want to invalidate others, and they try to force their beliefs onto others. And it's like, well, I do it this way. Why aren't you doing it this
Yeah,
way?
that's
And it's like,
the controlling
that's
aspect. Yeah.
right. And that's not how it works. Everybody is different, and you have to accept that. You cannot expect someone to be this for your own comfortability. The fact that it makes you uncomfortable, that's good because that's work on yourself to question, why am I uncomfortable?
Hmm.
Because you're uncomfortable, but they're not. They're living their truth. So if you're uncomfortable, it's not that there's something wrong. You have to figure out what's inside of you that's making you feel this way. And it goes back to sexuality. It's like, why are you so uncomfortable with homosexuality that has nothing to do with you? maybe there is. Maybe there is a part of you that is inclined, but you don't want to live that truth because of how you've been raised and you've been told.
Yeah.
I just, I don't ever judge anybody until they start hurting other people.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes down to. Everybody's journey is different.
Yeah, and I think that's, that's just a muscle that you have to use to get good at maneuvering through life and situations coming up, and not jumping to judgment to feel comfortable or okay with your own shit. Like that you have to really be comfortable with yourself and loving of yourself and accepting of yourself
Yeah.
enough to
Yeah.
when you go through those situations, you don't make it about something being wrong or being judgmental. I mean, the one big thing that you just touched on, with sexuality, with people being judgmental of others because they're expressing themselves authentically. It's not always even just about maybe that they're gay or have homosexual tendencies or bisexual tendencies. It's I would be comfortable betting money on the fact that it's just someone fully expressing themselves, just being able to see
Yeah.
somebody express themselves in a way that is true for them, like that. Like, I have a friend of mine, I mean, I've been around the gay community and every angle of LGBTQIA, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I've been around it all for years. And
Elemental P. Yeah.
yeah, and I've been around, I have a friend out here in Phoenix, and I just like love his whole personality. And
Yeah.
he just does like fucking amazing makeup, like just amazing makeup, and he'll like do his eyes and his whole face and just do this like really really incredible like drag type of makeup. But he's not like in drag. He just does like this really incredible makeup, and then he like goes out to hang out with his friends and family like on a normal
And he's a
basis.
straight guy?
No, he's homosexual.
Oh,
but
okay.
but it's just like, to me, it's just, I just like love being around that energy, because it's like, we live in like the suburbs of Phoenix. Like, he posted on his Instagram the other day. He was like, he'll know who he is when he hears this. It's so funny. He was like in a Walmart, and he's like, he just posted a picture of him with his makeup on. He's like, the stairs. But he just like walks around life, very similar to what we were talking about earlier with you, just authentically being themselves. And I think if more
Yeah.
people could just embrace that and stop giving a fuck about like what their adult self will feel like, what other people will look at them like, if they could just embody what it was like to be a 5-year-old little kid and not give a shit if you had boogers and food all over your fucking face, or if you said something stupid or fell down, like, that's, if you could just embody that,
Well, I mean, that's what it kind of goes to what I said earlier about, I realize this is all bullshit. Like, this
yeah,
is all a game that we're all accepted that we're going to play. And I'm just like, no, you guys look ridiculous. I'm going to do my thing. And that's the biggest issue with a lot of other people. They look at me and they're like, who do you think you are doing what we've been told that we can't do? Where do you get the nerve? And I'm like, well, I just have it and I'm doing it. And that's, why people like him, like your friend, people like me, people like you have been able to do what we do, successfully and stand out in ways that most people never get the chance to. A lot of people live in this sort of silent world, even though it's a vast world. They live in silence because they're not living their authenticity. So you never know about their story. Like,
yeah,
you don't have to be, excuse me, you don't have to be in the public eye to be seen. You can be seen just by being yourself. Most people, when you walk down the street, you don't see them. You see bodies moving, but you don't see that person, as opposed to your friend who's, this is me. I'm fucking rocking makeup just cuz I'm going to Walmart to
yeah,
shop for groceries. But he's being seen because it's so different. To see that confidence radiate is alarming to other people because they don't have that and they've been told they can't do that. And so others can be like inspired and others can feel threatened.
yeah.
And it's an affront to their very existence,
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that's the
and
beautiful thing is like, if
yeah,
you can move through your life being that way, like we talked about, being that permission for others to express themselves that way. And I mean, imagine if every day there's just one person that you make an impact on, That's
Yeah.
365 people in a year that you've given permission to open up and just be authentic, even if it's just for a day. I mean, once you open that door and you experience it and taste that like way of living, it's you will not forget it. You know what I mean? And like I know when I let fear come up, or I let when I feel like I need to turn my volume down for whatever fucking reason, I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
Now, if I let myself turn that shit all the way up, that's one thing. But sometimes, I let my volume get turned down, and I stay comfortable and scared. But at least I'm aware of it now.
You know, I've there was only one thing in my life. I just thought about this. There was only one thing in my life that I was actually very fearful, to the point where I was hiding it. The only thing that I've never hid my sexuality, um, but I was fearful of showing. Mm, so I have Tourette's.
Mm-hmm.
I was fearful of showing that I have Tourette's. For the longest time, I was always trying to hide that. And to the point where a couple years ago, I finally came out and said, I have Tourette's, because it had gotten so exhausting trying to hide that. And then when I edit my content, I see my Tourette's in full view, and then I was like trying to edit around it. And most people don't notice it. You have to really kind of notice me to notice it. Like when people think Tourette's, they think about, oh, fat, ass like a fart, that kind of
Yeah.
Tourette's. But
Yeah.
the Tourette's comes in many different ways. So for me, I have a nervous tick.
Yeah.
Um, and some of the ticks can be very subtle. Some of them can be very dramatic. And sometimes a new tick comes and I can't shake it off.
Yeah.
So like one of the ticks that I have is like with my neck, where I have to always do this.
Mm-hmm.
My eyes, I blink a lot. Sometimes one eye will blink more than the other, you know, and other times I have to let out a certain vocal sound to feel comfortable. If I don't, it eats me up inside. And I have this. I've been confident in every other aspect, but this is the one thing that I just could not share with myself because it was such a personal thing for me. Now that I finally let that out, I could care less about if people see me. And
Probably
I've
made your
had moments
editing
where
so
people,
much easier too, huh?
well, not so much easier, but just even like not having to watch like certain things. So like the people who are looking at me, they'll look and like, what the hell's going on with him? I could care less. It's
Yeah.
more like, you know what? Yes. And then if they do ask, I'm like, oh, I have Tourette's.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, okay. I always thought Tourette's was this, which is the common thing. It's like
Mm.
they think it's a certain way. They have no idea that Tourette's is actually very vast and it comes in many different forms. Some people can shake it off, others can't. I've never been able to shake off my Tourette's, but it's part of who I am. And why am I going to hide that?
Yeah. I love that,
You
man.
know?
It reminds me of this exercise one of my like mentors did with me, and it's just about like the exercise is really just about anything that you're holding on to, whether it's not talking about something, or it's you're holding on to a certain thought or a way of being, whatever it is. And so like he did this exercise where he's like, all right, I want you to like take your hands like this and like squeeze them. He's like, and squeeze them as hard as you can, like try to like break your knuckles, squeeze your hands so hard, and he makes you do it for like 30 seconds, and he's like, all right, now let go, and you're like, oh. And he's like, what was the best part of that experience? And it was like fucking letting go, dude. And it's just like, you know what I mean? Just your hands like blood rushes
Yeah,
back into your fingertips. You feel like your joints release all that pressure, and you're just like, holy shit. And then when you think about it, you're like, how fucking hard am I holding on to all of these things in my life when I could just like let go and just feel the release of like just being free and comfortable and okay with whatever it
it's
looks like.
exhilarating.
Yeah.
It's one of the greatest feelings, and I'm just fortunate. I'm at a point in my life where I really don't have any baggage. Like I can't even think right now of anything that I'm holding on. It's
That's
like I've
huge.
I've let go of so many things, and it's like I could care less what you think about me. I care more about how I treat you.
Mm.
as opposed to like how you treat me or what you think of me, because I can deal with how people treat me. I can deal with what people say to me. That it's of no concern to me. I'm responsible for myself and how I treat others. That I care about, and I never want to hurt somebody. And mind you, even as a recent, not recent, like in the past couple months, but like in the past couple years, I've hurt people, not deliberately, but
Hmm.
I've definitely crossed certain lines that I didn't know I did, and when I did, I was apologetic about. Some I can't take back because like I won't be given the chance to do that. But like that is something that I never want to do. I never want to hurt somebody. And if anything, if I can make it right, I will. But what somebody thinks of me and all that other stuff, like, unless you're treating me good, I'm not going to give you the power to have control over me.
Yeah.
So it's like when people are like, oh, you made me feel bad. Nobody can really make you feel bad unless you allow them to make you feel
Yeah.
bad.
That's a choice.
You're the one, yes, it really is a choice. It's not to say that you feeling bad about what somebody said to you is not valid. It's absolutely valid. Like, nobody wants to be called names or be uh, humiliated in any way. But the fact that you are taking what that person says, giving it weight, you're giving them a power that they never earned, that they
Hmm.
don't have over you. You know, you can call, I'm Hispanic. You can call me a spick all you want. It's not going to do shit to me. Now, if you call that to somebody else who I know will be offended, I will knock you the fuck out. Like, you can't offend me
Yeah.
with something. Like, you can't try to hurt me unless you're physically trying to hurt me.
Yeah.
And at that point, bring it on to the last man stands.
We fight.
We fight. I'm not saying I'm the greatest fighter, but get ready. But I am saying you cannot get to me. So you can call me a spick, and I'll be like, yes, and I can call myself many other things. Bring it. Like, I'm a faggot. Yes, exactly. I am absolutely a faggot. Oh, but you're a faggot. Like, yeah, I suck dick. You're right. Moving on.
I love you, man.
Oh, I've done that before to somebody. Like, oh, you fucking faggot. I was like, yeah, I suck dick. And would you like to try? Well, fuck you with that queer shit, dude. Like, okay, if you don't like that queer shit, then
people
move
get
on.
people get so intimidated when you just own who you are, man.
Yeah, but he couldn't. He had nothing else to go by because that
He's
was his way
yeah.
of like
He's like
jamming
this.
it down. It's like,
This
I'm
works on
not giving him
everyone
that.
else. This works
This
on
was everybody
everyone.
else. But I'm not giving him that power.
Yeah.
It's a disgusting word, in my opinion. Although some people reclaim that word. More power to them. But you know what? Like, I'm not going to give him the power to take this negative word to try to hurt me.
Yeah.
It's like, no. But at the same time, words do hold weight. They do have meaning, and you have to be very careful about what you say, because words matter in the sense of everybody's different. Everybody takes it differently. As a case in point, the N word is a word that should never be used. That word is probably the most offensive word in the human vocabulary.
Yeah.
Human vocabulary. There is no way around that word in trying to make it acceptable, except for the people who are in that oppressed group.
Yeah.
Anybody who takes offense with, well, why can't I say that word? They say it all the time. I was like, well, the person who created it was putting that person down. So guess what? The creator can't say it.
Yeah.
You can't say it. You have no right to say that. If they want to normalize that word within themselves, that is on them. But that word is not a word that should ever be used. It is a word that holds weight.
Yeah.
If there's a black person who gets that word flung to them, they have the choice of either taking offense to it, rightfully so, or saying, yeah, and that's the way I kind of hold it for myself. I know better than to say that word. And mixed with black.
Yeah.
But I don't look it, so I don't say it. But if somebody were to call me that word, and unfortunately it has been used, I'm like, okay, and like, what's your point? What was the end result of you saying that? What was it? Was I supposed to react? Was I supposed to fight you? Like, what did you want from that?
Yeah.
I'm not going to give it to you.
Yeah.
Bye. Anyways, that was a little bit of a tangent, but
No, but I think I
it
honestly feel like it really puts a bow on like this whole conversation that we've been having, though, of just truly, I mean, it comes back to one, being authentic with yourself, and two, knowing that like your truth and who you are is all that matters, right? And never letting that exterior, outward, energy that's coming towards you affect you unless it's something that is lifting you up, right? Unless it's something that somebody's
yeah,
trying to add value to your life, right? And I think you've painted a very beautiful picture in the last hour and a half of how we as human beings can add value to other people's lives through our own experiences or through letting other people just have their own experiences. I don't have to be
yeah,
able to relate to you to give you the honor of having the experience. I don't need to redirect you to the
yeah,
experience that I had so I can try to coach you through it and give you the lesson I learned. Like, you do you, boo. And if I'm going to be here and loving you and supporting you through it, no matter what. But if there's somewhere where I feel like I need to jump in to stop you from doing something that is going to be detrimental to you, I will voice it because I care enough about you to be honest. But
yeah,
I'm never going to
absolutely.
stop you from doing something. You know what I mean? Like, you got to run that course sometimes. That's just the reality of it.
So I have a friend who one of my best friends. She was going out with this guy. They ended up being my roommates, and they were a couple. Um, they had an quote unquote open relationship, but it was very one-sided. He wasn't really having sex with her, but he always wanted to have a threesome, and she would always come to me and just like try to help her out with her relationship. And so I would talk to both of them about, what's going on. And I would give her advice, or I'd not even give her advice. I would just say, oh, you can do this, you can do that. This is what I would do. That's what I always do. I always put
Mm-hmm.
it in what I would do as opposed to telling somebody what to do.
Yeah.
And it became this thing where it was just no matter what I said, it wasn't taking into account. And she just kept coming to me over and over again. I'm getting tired. And one of my favorite things to do is to go to a coffee shop, have coffee, and have conversations with my friends. That's one of my favorite things to do.
I think that's
When
literally
you
the last
take
thing
me,
we did together in
when
person.
you, yeah, did we?
Yeah, you, Ashley, and I on Melrose. I think that was the last time I saw
Oh,
you
yeah,
in
yeah.
person
That's right.
at that coffee
That's
shop.
right. Right. I love doing that. So when you take me out for coffee, you invite me to coffee to talk about this bullshit that we've talked about so many times. Now I'm livid. Now I'm pissed. Mind you, now I'm allowing this person to affect me, but it's more of the repetitiveness of this, what do you want from me?
Yeah.
Because you're not taking it. So finally, I knew what the conversation was going to be about. We get to the coffee shop. And she says, Wolfie, please help me out with this. I don't know what to do. And I'm like, you really want me to tell you what to do? You really want me to tell you what to do? And she's like, yes, tell me. And I knew what I was going to tell her. She wasn't going to. So I said, break up with him. And she was like, what? And I was like, did I stutter? Br- Break up with him right now. Let him go now. And she's like, I can't do that. It's like, then don't fucking ask me for anything. You want me to appease your feelings. You want me to make your narrative comfortable.
Mhm.
The narrative that you've built in your head. You want me to reaffirm it. I am not going to give you that. I'm going to tell you the honest truth because you already know that that's what you need to do.
Yeah.
The next day, I mean, we kind of left it off as like, that was her attitude. The next day, she barges into my room. She's like, Wolfie, I'm gonna break up with him. I'm like, do it. Don't tell me. Go ahead and do it. And she did.
You're like, do I need
She
to call the
broke up with
sheriff?
him. No, it wasn't. It wasn't that
I'm just
situation.
kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, but yeah, I mean, I'm the sheriff in town. I would have, but but no, and she broke up with him, and apparently she told me that his two best friends, like his closest friends, even they told her, break up with him. He's immature. He doesn't deserve you.
Yeah.
When his best friends tell you the exact same thing, and then she told me apparently they had already told her that. When I told her that, that was the nail in the coffin. She just could not admit that that was the reality. But when I said it, that was kind of it. And when she did it, not only was it a huge weight off her back, she was able to live the life that she always wanted. She didn't realize that she had been restraining herself because of this relationship that was not working. It was for her, that relationship was forming an identity for her that she desperately needed. Now she can gain the identity that she always wanted but was afraid to pursue. And guess what? I introduced her to a guy who I already knew that this would be the perfect match. And I kind of saw that they had looked at each other a certain way one time. And then my birthday, I got them to hang out with each other, went to the movies, and I'm like, let me play Puppet Master. They got together about a year, maybe two later, they got married.
Awesome.
They have a house in Vegas, and they have three kids together.
Wow. That's dope. That's so dope, dude.
And it was more of like, after that, after she broke up with that guy, she would ask me, hey, what do you think of this guy that I'm dating? And I would flat out say, I don't like him. She's like, really? It's like, I don't like this dude at all. Like, you want me to tell you the truth? I don't like him. And sure enough, she's like, oh yeah, he's not good. So the one guy that I said, he's the guy, she fucking listened to me. And that's the guy that she's with. And she's still madly in love with him.
Yeah. Dude, that's what having somebody in your life that isn't scared to tell you the truth will do for you. And you just owning it and not being I mean, it takes that, and it takes you being you and not giving a fuck what she thought, how she felt, any of that shit. It was just authenticity at its truest form, man.
And that's the way it should be. And it's the same thing with you. Like, I reached out to you because, I maybe I misread the post you did on Instagram, but I had thought that your grandmother had just passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And so I immediately was like, let me reach out to you because I wanted to be there for you if you needed it. I wouldn't have been offended if you said, no, I'm okay, because that's your journey. But I just felt so compelled, like, you're my friend. I wanted to be there for you. Because like, that's the kind of person that I want to be. I want to show up when I feel like it's appropriate to show up. But I'm giving people the license to say, no, I'm okay. Because, I'm not going to force that on anybody.
Yeah. Which I think is the best part about this, because look at us now. Now we got to have this deep dive conversation and just kind of like cultivate, more between us. And, it's been, I mean, dude, I haven't seen you since shit. I don't even remember. That was pre-COVID when I saw you.
It was pre-COVID. I think the last time I saw you was, I kind of want to say it was towards the end of 2019.
Yeah, it was a while, man.
Yeah.
It's
I have blonde hair.
You did have blonde hair. You did have blonde hair.
Yeah, because then I shaved my head around September. So it was probably in the summer that I last saw you with your girlfriend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've gotten married since then.
Oh, you got married?
Yeah. Well,
I didn't know that.
We were supposed to have a real, we'll brush over this really quick and then wrap things up. But yeah, we were supposed to get married in 2020, and then this wonderful coronavirus thing happened. Yeah. But so we got married at Burning Man that summer, actually, August of 2019. We did like a Burning Man ceremony. So
I didn't know that. Honestly, I kind of feel bad that I didn't keep up with if you've posted about it. But I didn't know that was a thing. Congrats.
Thanks, man. Yeah,
that's beautiful.
It's a blessing, dude. She's been my angel, my interruption. She's been very much like you in the sense of being like, I don't give a fuck what James thinks or how he feels right now. I'm gonna tell him exactly how shit is.
and she's been with you through the really, really times. The fact that she was still there, that says a lot about her. It says a lot about you. Yeah. And I'm just happy that you two have been able to not only push through that, are continuing to push through just the daily grind of life, and are on a new journey together.
Thanks, man.
That's awesome. I'm really happy that this lasted.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm stoked about you and your life and where you're at now, being in Texas. Big
Yeah.
things, continue
I'm
to happen.
Texas.
Hell yeah. Well,
Yeah.
well, I always like to wrap up just plugging you. So if any of the listeners have Netflix, there is Money Shot still on, right? Netflix, is that
Oh,
just
I
yeah?
mean that ain't gonna go anywhere
There you
unless
go.
they
It's a
actually
Netflix
physically pull
original,
it
right?
off.
Yeah, it's a
It's a
Netflix.
Netflix original. I'm in a
Oh,
Netflix original.
well,
Oh,
so
turn up.
if you thought that this man looks familiar and you don't happen to watch pornography, maybe you've scrolled across him on on Netflix in the Money Shot. It's the
Money
Pornhub
shot a
story.
Pornhub story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Pornhub story. So go check it out if you're interested. Or they can follow you on Twitter and Instagram. It's Wolf Hudson is by on both of those.
No, it's Wolf Hudson is by on Twitter. It's Wolf Hudson official on Instagram. Which is also the same for Thread, which is the Instagram
Mm-hmm.
social media. Um, and then onlyfans.com/Wolf Hudson is by, and you can find me on Pornhub as Wolf Hudson. You'll find my channel very readily. So I mean, just Google
Sometimes
Wolf
by
Hudson
accident, it's so readily available.
by accident. Oh, oh my
Oh
God, I
man,
slayed myself. But no, if you just get on any search engine and look up Wolf Hudson, you will be able to easily find me on any platform.
absolutely. 17 years of
Yeah.
content there, just waiting for you to view.
Good Lord, 17 years. If I'm in this next year, it'll be old enough to legally vote. That's how long I've been in porn, old enough to legally vote.
That's impressive.
That's wild. I never thought that would ever be a thing. I had a 2 year mark. And now it's going to be 18 years. My end goal, though, just to kind of wrap it up, is to hopefully by my early 40s is to wrap things up.
Yeah.
Like definitely.
What's next for you?
Behind the camera.
Behind the camera? Nice.
I want to continue producing bi porn, but the new crop of kids, let them do all the work. I just want to be able to film it and then jerk off to it later.
There we go, man. The gift that keeps
And then
on
maybe
giving.
and then sell it and hopefully people want to jerk off to it.
Yeah, dude. I mean, that's a pretty like multifaceted type of thing. It's like you get to film it, you get to edit it, you get your artistic fill, you get to pleasure yourself to it, and then you get to let everybody else pleasure themselves while you also make money. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Oh shit, I make money off of it too. That's like, oh my God, I can pay the rent. I can feed my dog.
there you go.
When I look at my dog, I'm like, she's alive because I have sex with men and women. Fucking them feeds her.
The Wolf Hudson legacy, man, just keeps on going. I love it.
It trickles. But anyways, I appreciate you having me, man. I'm glad that you're creating this space and allowed me to speak about all this interesting topics that I didn't think I really would be getting into, but I'm glad that I got to do it with you and catch up with you.
Absolutely, man. Well, thank you for joining me, and for like to the listeners, like I appreciate your candor as always. I knew that was coming, but I'm sure they didn't know what to expect. So thank you for just being you, man. But I love you, brother, and
I love you too.
we'll have to do a part 2 sometime.
Absolutely.
All right,
Anytime.
man. All right, brother.